My phone buzzed at 8:30 on a Tuesday evening, and I almost ignored it when I saw Mom's name on the screen. Almost. The conversation that followed changed everything between us forever. She didn't bother with pleasantries, diving straight into demands about Madison's upcoming wedding and how I needed to contribute $120,000 toward the celebration. Her voice carried that familiar tone of entitlement, as if my recent promotion at the tech company automatically made my bank account available to the family. When I reminded her how they refused to contribute even one penny toward my college tuition, forcing me to graduate drowning in debt, her response chilled me to the bone. "That was different," she said coldly. "Madison deserves this. The ultimatum came next: contribute the money or lose your family forever." I stared at my phone long after the line went dead. Standing in my modest Denver apartment, I could feel my hands trembling with a mixture of rage and heartbreak that I hadn't experienced in years. The conversation with Mom had ripped open wounds I thought had healed, bringing back memories of the most devastating betrayal of my young adult life. I walked to my kitchen window looking out at the city lights while my mind traveled back 8 years to when I was 18 and believed my parents actually loved me. Back then, I trusted their promises about college support, never questioning why they always changed the subject when I brought up financial aid forms or tuition payments. Frank and Linda were successful small business owners in our Colorado mountain town. Dad's plumbing company had contracts with every new construction project within 50 miles, and Mom's real estate career thrived during the housing boom. They drove luxury SUVs, took yearly trips to Europe, and our house was the envy of the neighborhood with its granite countertops and heated floors. Throughout high school, they promised me that college money was secured. They spoke about their savings account dedicated to my education, how proud they felt, knowing their son would graduate debt-free unlike so many of his peers. I worked part-time jobs during summers, but they insisted the money was for personal expenses, not tuition. The college fund was handled, they assured me repeatedly. The devastating truth emerged 2 weeks before my freshman orientation at Colorado State University. I discovered they had spent every dollar of my supposed college fund on a luxury Mediterranean cruise and a complete home renovation, including a new hot tub and landscaping that cost more than most people's annual salaries. When I confronted them, broken and desperate, Dad delivered words that still echo in my nightmares. "You're a man now, Avery. Real men pay their own way through life. Madison will always be our little princess, who deserves everything we can give her." Those exact words became the foundation of our relationship from that moment forward. While I scrambled to secure student loans grants and work-study programs, Madison enjoyed her sophomore year of high school with a brand new Honda Civic weekly shopping trips for designer clothes and private tutoring that cost more per month than my food budget. The contrast was stark and intentional. My college years became a nightmare of 18-hour days split between classes and multiple jobs. I worked overnight shifts at a 24-hour diner, weekend shifts at a hardware store, and picked up freelance computer repair work whenever possible. My diet consisted primarily of instant noodles, peanut butter sandwiches, and whatever free food I could find at campus events. There were nights when I slept in my beaten-down Honda Accord between jobs and morning classes, too exhausted to drive home to my shared apartment 40 minutes away. I showered at the campus recreation center and kept changes of clothes in my car trunk. Some of my classmates probably thought I was homeless, and technically, some nights I was. The computer science program demanded intense focus and long hours of coding practice, but I was constantly distracted by financial stress and physical exhaustion. While my classmates attended study groups and networking events, I was serving tables or unclogging toilets to pay for textbooks and rent. Meanwhile, Madison's social media posts showcased her privileged lifestyle. Spring break trips to Cancun, shopping sprees in Denver's upscale Cherry Creek district, and dinner dates at restaurants where a single meal cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The posts were carefully curated to display a life of ease and abundance that her older brother could never afford. The cruelest part was family gatherings, where relatives praised our parents for raising such a hardworking son while simultaneously celebrating Madison's achievements that were funded entirely by family money. I learned to smile and nod when aunts and uncles commented on my dedication, never revealing the full story of my parents' abandonment. By graduation, I carried $80,000 in student loan debt, a burden that would follow me for decades. But I also carried something else, a degree in computer science that I had earned through pure determination and sacrifice. Every line of code I wrote, every algorithm I mastered, every project I completed represented victory over the family system that tried to break me. Now at 26, I worked as a senior software developer for a growing startup in Denver. My salary of $95,000 felt like wealth compared to my college poverty, but the student loan payments and responsible budgeting left little room for luxury. I lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment, drove a reliable used Toyota, and saved money for genuine emergencies. The phone call from Mom represented something far worse than a simple request for money. It revealed that nothing had changed in their fundamental view of our family dynamics. I was still seen as Madison's future provider, not as their son deserving of respect and consideration. As I stood at my window that night, I made a decision that would define the rest of our relationships. I would not enable their continued financial favoritism and manipulation. The 18-year-old boy who begged for their help was gone. In his place stood a man who understood his worth and refused to be treated as a family ATM. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Madison calling directly. I hesitated for a moment, then answered, knowing that whatever came next would test everything I had learned about standing up for myself. Her voice was thick with tears and desperation. "Avery, you have to help me. The wedding venue needs immediate payment or they'll give our date away. Please, I'm begging you." But beneath her pleas, I heard something else that made my blood run cold. She mentioned that Mom and Dad had already promised the venue owner that I would cover the costs using my reputation as collateral. The family friend who owned the venue now expected payment from me, personally believing I had already agreed to the arrangement. That's when I realized this wasn't just about money or favoritism. My parents had set me up for a trap that could destroy my professional reputation and financial stability, whether I agreed to help or not. The apartment building's intercom system buzzed relentlessly at 6:30 the next evening, creating an annoying electronic symphony that echoed through my hallway. I knew before checking the monitor that Madison had arrived for what would undoubtedly be an emotional assault designed to break down my resistance. Through the grainy security camera, I could see her disheveled appearance, normally perfect blonde hair tangled, and unkempt designer makeup streaked down her cheeks, wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. The massive engagement ring on her finger caught the hallway light, a princess-cut diamond surrounded by smaller stones that likely exceeded the value of my car. I buzzed her up, bracing myself for the performance that was about to unfold in my living room. Madison collapsed onto my secondhand couch, as if her legs could no longer support her weight, clutching tissues that were already soaked with tears. Her breathing came in dramatic gasps between words as she launched into what felt like a rehearsed monologue about how her entire life was crumbling without this dream wedding. The wedding plans she described existed in a realm of luxury that seemed disconnected from reality. The venue was a historic mansion in Aspen with panoramic mountain views available for only 3 weekends per year at a cost of $45,000. A celebrity wedding planner from Los Angeles would coordinate every detail for an additional $15,000 fee. Flowers imported from Ecuador and Holland would create installations throughout the property, with each centerpiece containing exotic orchids worth more than some people's monthly rent. Her wedding dress came from an exclusive Beverly Hills boutique, a custom creation with hand-sewn pearls and intricate lacework that required multiple fittings over 6 months. The price tag of $15,000 didn't include the matching shoes, undergarments, and accessories that brought the total outfit cost to nearly $20,000. Madison showed me thick binders filled with color-coordinated planning sheets, vendor contracts, and guest lists that revealed the scope of her expectations. 300 invited guests would feast on a 7-course dinner prepared by a James Beard award-winning chef with premium wine pairings and a dessert table featuring delicacies flown in from French patisseries. As she continued describing the entertainment plans, including a live band, professional dancers, and a fireworks display over the mountains, I began to understand that this wasn't just a wedding celebration. This was Madison's attempt to create a social media spectacle that would establish her status among Tyler's wealthy family and social circle. Tyler's background became clearer through her tearful explanations. His family owned a chain of luxury hotels across the western United States, with generational wealth that afforded them multiple residences and investment portfolios worth millions. Madison had been dating him for 3 years, gradually becoming aware of the lifestyle differences between their families. The manipulation tactics she employed were sophisticated and calculating, though I doubt she recognized them as such. She brought up our deceased grandmother, claiming that Grandma Rose had always dreamed of seeing her granddaughter married in the style of European royalty. She conveniently forgot that Grandma Rose had been a practical woman who believed in saving money and living modestly. Madison reminded me of childhood moments when she had shared toys, clothes, or Halloween candy, framing these normal sibling interactions as evidence of her generous nature and reason for my current obligation. She spoke about my professional success as if it were a family achievement rather than the result of my individual effort and sacrifice. The guilt campaign expanded to include emotional manipulation about family loyalty and love. According to Madison's twisted logic, refusing to fund her wedding meant I didn't truly care about her happiness or our family's reputation. She painted a picture of herself as the victim of circumstances beyond her control, conveniently ignoring the choices that led to her current financial dependence. But as Madison continued talking, cracks began appearing in her carefully constructed narrative. She admitted that Tyler's family had already expressed concerns about the wedding's excessive cost and their disapproval of what they viewed as wasteful spending. His parents had specifically refused to contribute any money toward what they called a ridiculous display of poor financial judgment. The revelation that Tyler's wealthy family opposed the extravagant wedding created a troubling picture of Madison's motivations. This wasn't about celebrating love or beginning a marriage with joy and intimacy. This was about proving herself worthy of acceptance among people whose approval she desperately craved, but would likely never fully receive. Madison's voice dropped to a whisper as she confessed her deepest fear that Tyler's family would never see her as good enough for their son. The wedding had become her strategy for demonstrating sophistication and social status, a financial performance designed to earn respect from people who measured worth through material displays. As I listened to my sister's breakdown, I felt a complex mixture of sympathy and frustration. She had been raised to believe that love and approval could be purchased through expensive gestures and material abundance. Our parents had taught her that her value as a person depended on external validation and costly celebrations rather than character, kindness, or genuine relationships. But I also recognized the manipulation for what it was, an attempt to transfer responsibility for her poor financial decisions and emotional insecurities onto my shoulders. Madison wanted me to solve problems that she and our parents had created through years of irresponsible spending and unrealistic expectations. The conversation reached its emotional peak when Madison grabbed my hands and looked directly into my eyes, her voice breaking with what appeared to be genuine desperation. She spoke about feeling worthless and unloved if she couldn't provide Tyler with the wedding experience his family expected. She claimed that my refusal to help would destroy not only her marriage plans, but also her relationship with our parents and extended family. That's when the most shocking revelation emerged, almost casually mentioned between sobs, about her uncertain future. Tyler's family had given him a clear ultimatum: elope, with a small ceremony that focused on their commitment rather than social spectacle, or face complete disinheritance from the family fortune. The pressure wasn't coming from external sources or venue requirements, as she had initially claimed. Madison was fighting against Tyler's family wishes, his own preferences for simplicity and basic financial reality, because she believed that compromise would represent failure. She had convinced herself that accepting anything less than her dream wedding would prove she wasn't worthy of love, respect, or a place in Tyler's social circle. As I processed this information, I began to understand that helping Madison financially wouldn't solve her underlying problems. It would only enable her continued avoidance of reality and personal growth, while placing the burden of her emotional healing on my financial sacrifice. The evening ended with Madison leaving my apartment more upset than when she had arrived, unable to understand why her brother wouldn't rescue her from the consequences of unrealistic expectations and poor planning. But her visit had accomplished something she never intended. It clarified for me that saying no to her wedding funding was not just about protecting my own financial stability. It was about refusing to participate in a family dynamic that had already caused tremendous damage to both of us, even if Madison couldn't see it yet. The next evening brought an orchestrated assault that revealed the true depth of my parents' manipulation and entitlement. Frank and Linda arrived at my apartment building together, having been summoned by Madison's tearful phone calls about my continued refusal to cooperate with their financial demands. I watched through my window as they approached the building, their body language radiating determination and barely controlled anger. Dad carried himself with the swagger of a man accustomed to getting his way through intimidation, while Mom clutched her designer purse like a weapon she intended to use against my defenses. The knock on my door came sharp and insistent, followed immediately by Mom's voice, demanding that I open up for a family meeting that couldn't be delayed. When I opened the door, they pushed past me without invitation, claiming ownership of my space and setting the tone for everything that followed. Frank positioned himself near my front door, blocking my exit route, in a move I recognized from childhood confrontations. His physical presence had always been his primary tool for controlling situations, and he clearly intended to use every advantage available. Linda took command of my living room, rearranging my furniture to create a formal setting that suggested this was an official family tribunal, rather than a discussion. The interrogation began with questions about my financial status, my career prospects, and my obligations to family members who had supported me during my childhood. They spoke about their investment in raising me as if parenthood were a business transaction that guaranteed future returns rather than an expression of love and responsibility. Mom's approach relied on emotional manipulation mixed with financial mathematics that defied logic and basic fairness. She calculated the cost of my food, clothing, housing, and education from birth through high school graduation, presenting an itemized bill for parental care that I had supposedly never repaid. According to her twisted accounting, I owed them approximately $200,000 for the privilege of being their child. The revelation of their current financial status created a stark contrast with their demands for my money. Frank described his plumbing business's recent expansion, including new trucks, equipment, and contracts that generated steady income throughout the year. Linda's real estate career had flourished during the recent market boom, with commissions from luxury home sales providing substantial bonuses beyond her regular income. Their lifestyle choices painted a picture of people who lived without financial constraints or long-term planning. The $40,000 boat they had purchased last spring sat unused in their driveway for most of the year. Their annual European vacations cost more than many families spent on housing, yet they considered these expenses necessary rather than luxurious. Frank's intimidation tactics escalated as the evening progressed, including veiled threats about damaging my professional reputation within our small community network. He reminded me that his business relationships extended throughout the construction industry and that negative word of mouth could impact my career prospects if I ever decided to return to our hometown area. The threats expanded beyond personal consequences to include my exclusion from family events, holiday celebrations, and future milestone occasions. Linda painted a picture of family gatherings where my absence would be explained by my selfishness and lack of loyalty to the people who had raised me with love and sacrifice. But the most devastating manipulation came when they revealed the full extent of their expectations for my financial contribution to Madison's future. This wasn't just about her wedding costs. They had been planning for years to rely on my income as a supplement to their retirement and Madison's ongoing financial needs. According to their vision, my success in the technology industry made me responsible for ensuring that Madison never experienced financial stress or limitation. They expected me to contribute to her future home purchase, her children's education costs, and any other expenses that exceeded Tyler's ability or willingness to provide. The twisted logic of their financial planning became clear as they explained their reasoning. Since they had invested money and effort in raising both children, they deserved returns on that investment through our adult contributions to family welfare. Madison's role was to provide them with grandchildren and social status through her marriage to Tyler, while my role was to provide financial security for everyone. Their demands revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of parent-child relationships and basic financial responsibility. They had created a family system where love and acceptance were conditional on financial performance, and where successful children were expected to subsidize their siblings' poor financial decisions. As the confrontation continued, I realized that my parents had never seen me as their son, deserving of respect and consideration. I was a financial resource to be managed and exploited, valued only for my earning potential and willingness to comply with their demands. The evening reached its climax when Frank pulled out a manila envelope containing documents that would change everything between us forever. Inside were contracts for wedding services totaling $180,000, not the $120,000 they had initially mentioned. Catering agreements, venue reservations, entertainment contracts, and vendor deposits had been signed using my personal information as the guaranteeing party. My signature had been forged on multiple legal documents creating financial obligations that I had never agreed to accept. The contracts bound me legally to payment responsibilities for Madison's wedding expenses regardless of my actual willingness to participate in the arrangement. Linda presented the evidence with a mixture of triumph and desperation, believing that legal liability would force my compliance with their demands. They had calculated that facing potential fraud charges for disputing the signatures would be worse than simply paying the money and accepting their family system of financial manipulation. But they had made a critical mistake in their strategy. By forging my signature and creating legal documents without my knowledge or consent, they had committed multiple felonies that could result in criminal charges, significant fines, and potential jail time. Their attempt to trap me financially had actually created evidence of their own criminal behavior. As I reviewed the contracts with growing horror and anger, I realized that my parents had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. This wasn't just family drama or financial disagreement. It was criminal fraud perpetrated by the people who were supposed to love and protect me. The meeting ended with my parents leaving the documents on my coffee table, confident that legal pressure would succeed where emotional manipulation had failed. They walked out of my apartment believing they had won a victory that would secure funding for Madison's wedding and establish their continuing control over my adult financial decisions. But their criminal actions had actually accomplished something they never intended. They had given me the evidence and motivation I needed to fight back against years of family abuse and manipulation. The scared 18-year-old boy who had begged for their help with college expenses was gone forever. In his place stood a man with resources, knowledge, and determination to protect himself from further exploitation, even if it meant exposing his own parents' crimes to legal authorities and destroying our family relationships permanently. The morning after discovering the forged contracts, I sat in the downtown Denver office of Marcus Rodriguez, a lawyer friend from college, who specialized in white-collar crime and contract disputes. The documents spread across his mahogany conference table told a story of systematic fraud that exceeded anything I had imagined possible for my own family. Marcus examined each contract with growing amazement and professional concern, pointing out details that revealed the sophisticated planning behind the forgery scheme. My signature had been practiced and perfected across multiple documents, suggesting weeks or months of preparation. Personal information, including my social security number, employment details, and banking information, had been used to establish my financial liability without any authorization. The legal implications were staggering in their scope and potential consequences. 12 different vendors had contracts binding me to payment obligations, totaling $187,000, including interest and penalty clauses. If I disputed the signatures and claimed fraud, I would need to prove forgery through handwriting analysis and provide evidence that I had never authorized the agreements. However, Marcus explained that criminal fraud charges against my parents could result in their imprisonment, substantial fines, and permanent criminal records that would destroy their business reputations and professional licenses. The choice between financial ruin and family destruction weighed heavily on my conscience as we discussed possible strategies. But the legal crisis represented only the beginning of my family's betrayal. That afternoon brought a phone call from Madison that revealed how desperate she had become and how little she understood about the reality of her situation. Madison met me at a coffee shop near my apartment, her appearance even more disheveled than during her previous visit. Dark circles under her eyes suggested sleepless nights, and her normally perfect appearance showed signs of stress and emotional breakdown that makeup couldn't hide. Through tears and broken explanations, Madison confessed that Tyler's family had delivered their ultimatum with a specific deadline: choose between the elaborate wedding and his inheritance by the end of the month. Tyler himself had begun expressing doubts about their relationship, not because of love or compatibility issues, but because of the financial stress and family drama surrounding their engagement. The wedding invitations had already been sent to 300 guests, creating social obligations that Madison felt unable to escape without public humiliation. Wedding party members had paid for dresses, arranged time off from work, and booked travel accommodations based on her promises of a luxury celebration that was now financially impossible. Madison's mental health was deteriorating under the pressure of maintaining appearances while her engagement crumbled. She had been taking anxiety medication prescribed by her doctor and had missed several days of work due to stress-related illness that she couldn't explain to her employer without revealing her personal crisis. But the most devastating revelation came when Madison admitted that she had never actually wanted the extravagant wedding celebration. The elaborate plans had been Mom's vision pushed on Madison as a way to demonstrate family success and social status. Madison had been trying to earn approval and love through compliance with expectations that felt alien to her actual preferences and personality. Tyler had repeatedly suggested a small ceremony, focused on their commitment rather than social spectacle. But Madison had rejected these proposals because she feared disappointing our parents and appearing inferior to Tyler's wealthy family. The wedding had become a symbol of her worth rather than a celebration of love. As Madison spoke about her fears and insecurities, I began to understand how our parents' manipulation had damaged both of us in different ways. While I had been abandoned to struggle financially and develop independence through necessity, Madison had been smothered with false support that prevented her from developing genuine confidence and decision-making skills. The conversation revealed that Madison had no realistic understanding of money budgets or financial responsibility. Our parents had always provided whatever she wanted without requiring her to consider costs, consequences, or alternatives. She had never held a job that required her to budget expenses or make financial sacrifices. Tyler's family's disapproval of the wedding plans had forced Madison to confront financial realities for the first time in her life. She was learning that her desires couldn't always be satisfied through parental funding, and that adult relationships required compromise and practical decision-making skills she had never developed. Meanwhile, the community pressure continued building as family friends and relatives began asking questions about my supposed generous contribution to Madison's wedding expenses. Our parents had been telling people that I had volunteered to pay for everything as a way of giving back to the family that had supported my education and career development. The lies created social situations where relatives praised my generosity while simultaneously making me feel guilty for considering backing out of commitments I had never actually made. Family friends approached me at grocery stores and community events thanking me for being such a wonderful brother and role model for other successful children. The isolation was crushing as I realized how thoroughly our parents had constructed a narrative that painted me as either a generous family hero or a selfish betrayer, depending on my willingness to comply with their demands. There was no middle ground where I could simply be their son deserving of respect and consideration rather than their financial resource. That evening brought the most shocking discovery of all when I received a phone call from my bank about unusual activity on my accounts. Someone had been attempting to access my online banking information using security questions and personal details that only family members would know. Investigation revealed that my parents had been trying to transfer money directly from my savings account to cover some of the wedding deposits they had made without authorization. Their attempts had failed due to security protocols, but the electronic trail provided clear evidence of their intent to steal money, rather than simply manipulate me into voluntary contributions. The financial investigation also revealed that Frank and Linda had taken out a second mortgage on their home to cover the initial wedding deposits, believing they could force me to reimburse them before the loan payments became due. Their own financial recklessness had created a crisis that threatened their home ownership and credit ratings. Their businesses were struggling due to poor management and excessive personal spending that had been disguised as business expenses. The luxury lifestyle they displayed was funded through debt and credit arrangements that required constant income to maintain, leaving them financially vulnerable, despite their apparent success. Madison had been completely unaware of our parents' financial problems, having been told that money was never a concern and that her wedding expenses were easily affordable. Learning about their debt and financial manipulation caused another emotional breakdown as she realized how many lies had shaped her understanding of family relationships. As the week progressed, I found myself facing an impossible choice between protecting my own financial stability and exposing my family's criminal behavior to legal authorities. The 18-year-old boy who had once begged for their help was gone, replaced by an adult who understood that enabling their manipulation would only lead to further abuse and family destruction. But I also knew that pursuing criminal charges would permanently destroy any possibility of healthy family relationships in the future. The decision would require me to choose between justice and the hope that my parents might someday change their behavior and learn to treat me with respect and honesty. The weight of that choice kept me awake at night, staring at my ceiling, and wondering whether family loyalty meant accepting abuse, or whether true love sometimes required setting boundaries that felt cruel, but were actually necessary for everyone's long-term healing and growth. The phone call that shattered my world came on a Thursday morning while I was reviewing code for an important client presentation. Helen Morrison from Human Resources asked me to come to her office immediately for a discussion about financial irregularities that had been brought to the company's attention through anonymous complaints. Walking down the hallway to HR felt like marching toward my execution, my mind racing through possibilities while my colleagues avoided eye contact in a way that suggested office gossip had already begun spreading. The startup environment where I worked thrived on trust and collaboration, making any suggestion of financial impropriety potentially career-ending. Helen's office felt smaller than usual as she presented documents that made my stomach drop with recognition and horror. Anonymous complaints filed with the company ethics board questioned how my lifestyle could be supported by my current salary, specifically mentioning expensive family financial contributions that exceeded my apparent means. Company credit card records had been requested by someone claiming to investigate possible personal use of business expenses. The implications were devastating for someone in my position. Software developers with access to sensitive client data and financial systems were held to the highest ethical standards, and even unproven allegations could result in immediate termination and industry blacklisting. My reputation for integrity and reliability had been one of my greatest professional assets. But the attack on my career represented only the beginning of my family's coordinated assault on my independence. Over the following days, co-workers began treating me differently, conversations stopping when I entered rooms, and invitations to after-work gatherings mysteriously disappearing. Management started scrutinizing my work with unprecedented attention, questioning decisions that had never been problematic before. The professional isolation was crushing, but it paled in comparison to what came next. My parents had orchestrated a massive family gathering at Madison's apartment under the pretense of planning final wedding details, but their actual purpose was creating a public forum for my humiliation and forced compliance. Walking into Madison's living room felt like entering a courtroom where I was the defendant facing a jury of relatives, family, friends, and community members who had already decided my guilt. The apartment had been arranged with chairs in a semicircle, facing a single seat, obviously intended for me, creating a formal atmosphere of judgment and condemnation. Uncle Robert and Aunt Susan had driven in from Colorado Springs along with my cousins Derek and Amanda, who had always been closer to Madison than to me. Family friends, including the Hendersons, Millers, and Johnsons, filled the remaining chairs, their expressions ranging from disappointment to outright hostility as I surveyed the assembled group. Mom stood at the front of the room like a prosecutor, presenting her case to the jury, armed with prepared talking points about family loyalty, financial responsibility, and the obligations of successful children to support their siblings during important life events. She spoke about my childhood as if every meal Christmas gift and parental sacrifice had been carefully calculated investments requiring specific returns. The guilt campaign that followed was systematic and coordinated with different relatives taking turns to express their disappointment in my selfishness and lack of family values. Uncle Robert spoke about the sacrifices he had made for his children, while Aunt Susan reminded everyone about times when our family had helped other relatives during financial emergencies. The Hendersons contributed stories about their own children's generosity towards siblings, creating implicit comparisons that painted me as the family failure, who had forgotten his roots and abandoned his responsibilities. The Millers talked about community values and the importance of supporting family members during significant celebrations like weddings and graduations. Each speech felt like a carefully rehearsed performance designed to increase my shame and isolation while building consensus around my guilt and obligation. The speakers avoided mentioning my college experiences or the financial abandonment I had experienced, focusing instead on my current success and supposed duty to share that success with less fortunate family members. Madison sat in the center of the group, tears streaming down her face as speaker after speaker reinforced her victimhood and my cruelty. She had been positioned as the innocent party whose dreams were being destroyed by her brother's greed and selfishness, with no mention of the unrealistic expectations or poor financial planning that had created the crisis. The emotional manipulation reached its peak when Tyler arrived, with his parents creating a moment that would define everything about our family's future relationships. I had never met the Blackwood family before, but their wealth and sophistication were immediately apparent in their clothing demeanor and the way they surveyed the assembled group with barely concealed disdain. Tyler's confession to the group created a silence that felt like the moment before a thunderclap. He had been investigating Madison's family finances as part of prenup negotiations, and what he discovered had fundamentally changed his perspective on our family dynamics and Madison's suitability as a marriage partner. Frank and Linda's businesses were failing due to years of poor management, excessive personal spending, and financial decisions that prioritized appearance over sustainability. They had been living beyond their means for decades, using credit and debt to maintain a lifestyle that their actual income couldn't support. The luxury vacations, expensive cars, and home improvements had been funded through loans and credit arrangements that were now threatening their financial survival. Madison had been completely unaware of their financial problems because our parents had hidden their debt behind a facade of prosperity and success. The college fund they claimed to have spent on home improvements had never existed. They had been planning to force me to pay for my own education from the moment I started high school. The revelation that our parents had been lying to Madison about their financial status created a moment of shocked recognition that changed everyone's understanding of our family dynamics. Madison's face showed the dawning realization that her entire understanding of family wealth and security had been based on lies and manipulation. But Tyler's announcement contained an even more devastating element that completely destroyed my parents' manipulation strategy. He was breaking off the engagement not because of money or wedding expenses, but because he couldn't marry into a family built on lies, manipulation, and criminal fraud. The Blackwood family's investigation had uncovered evidence of the forged contract's identity theft and attempted bank fraud that my parents had committed in their efforts to force my financial compliance. Tyler's family lawyer had already contacted law enforcement about potential criminal charges, making it clear that the wedding was the least of our family's problems. Madison's breakdown was complete and heartbreaking, as she realized that her entire relationship with Tyler had been destroyed not by my refusal to pay for the wedding, but by our parents' lies and criminal behavior. The elaborate wedding plans had been meaningless because her fiancé was walking away from their relationship entirely. The assembled family members sat in stunned silence as Tyler and his parents left the apartment, taking with them any hope Madison had harbored about salvaging her engagement or her future with the Blackwood family. The social humiliation was total and public, witnessed by everyone who had gathered to pressure me into financial compliance. As the evening collapsed into chaos and recriminations, I faced a moment of choice that would define the rest of my life. I could continue enabling my family's dysfunction by paying for Madison's wedding to no one, or I could walk away from the toxic relationships that had already caused tremendous damage to both Madison and me. The 18-year-old boy, who had begged for college help, was truly gone now, replaced by a man who understood that saving his family would require destroying the financial manipulation and lies that had defined our relationships for years. Sometimes love meant setting boundaries that felt cruel but were actually necessary for everyone's long-term healing and growth. Standing in Madison's living room, surrounded by the wreckage of our family's lies, I knew that my decision would either enable continued dysfunction or begin the painful process of healing that could only start with honesty, accountability, and the end of financial abuse disguised as family loyalty. Taking 3 days off work felt like retreating to plan a battle that would determine the future of my family and my own psychological well-being. The time away from office pressures and colleague scrutiny allowed me to develop a comprehensive strategy for addressing the criminal, fraud, family manipulation, and professional attacks that had nearly destroyed my career and personal life. Marcus Rodriguez's law office became my headquarters for building a case that would protect me legally while forcing my parents to face consequences for their crimes. We methodically documented every forged signature, every unauthorized use of my personal information, and every attempt to access my financial accounts without permission. The private investigator Marcus recommended Patricia Chang had extensive experience with family financial fraud cases and understood the psychological dynamics that made these crimes particularly devastating. Her investigation revealed patterns of manipulation and abuse that extended far beyond the wedding contract forgeries. Financial records showed that my parents had been using Madison's identity for credit card applications and loan requests since she turned 18, accumulating debt in her name without her knowledge or consent. The identity theft had damaged her credit rating and created financial obligations she had never authorized, making her another victim of their criminal behavior, rather than simply a beneficiary of their favoritism. Bank statements revealed attempts to access my accounts dating back 3 years, suggesting that the wedding crisis had simply provided an opportunity for financial crimes they had been planning and attempting for an extended period. The attempted unauthorized transfers represented felony charges that could result in significant jail time and permanent criminal records. But the investigation also uncovered evidence that would help rebuild my professional reputation and protect my career from their defamation campaign. Electronic records showed that the anonymous complaints to my employer had originated from computers at my parents' business locations, providing clear proof of their coordinated attack on my professional standing. Armed with comprehensive evidence of criminal fraud and defamation, I developed a strategy that would force accountability while offering opportunities for redemption and family healing. The approach balanced my need for protection with recognition that completely destroying my family would serve no one's long-term interests. The first step involved presenting evidence to my company's human resources department, clearing my name while demonstrating the malicious nature of the attacks on my professional reputation. Helen Morrison's expression shifted from concern to outrage as she reviewed documented proof that family members had filed false complaints and attempted to damage my career through lies and manipulation. Company leadership responded by threatening legal action against my parents for defamation and interference with business relationships, while simultaneously offering support and protection for my continued employment. My colleagues' attitudes shifted dramatically once the truth emerged, with many expressing admiration for my integrity under pressure and disgust at the family betrayal I had endured. The professional vindication felt wonderful, but it represented only the foundation for addressing the deeper family problems that had created the crisis. My strategy for dealing with Madison required delicate balance between accountability and compassion, recognizing that she had been victimized by our parents' lies while also enabling their manipulative behavior. I met Madison at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant where we could have an honest conversation without family interference or emotional manipulation from other parties. Her appearance showed the toll of recent stress, weight loss, pale complexion, and nervous mannerisms that suggested ongoing anxiety and depression. The conversation began with my presentation of evidence, showing how our parents had victimized her through identity theft and financial fraud. Bank records and credit reports revealed damage to her financial standing that she had been completely unaware of, making her realize that their favoritism had actually been another form of abuse, disguised as love and support. Madison's reaction progressed through stages of disbelief, anger, and finally grief as she processed the reality of our family dynamics. She had been raised to believe that love could be earned through compliance, and that her value depended on external validation rather than inherent worth as a person. But I also offered her a path forward that focused on genuine independence and authentic relationships, rather than continued dependence on family financial support and approval. My proposal included helping her plan a small, intimate wedding celebration that reflected her actual values and preferences rather than social expectations or parental pressure. The alternative wedding I suggested would cost approximately $8,000 for a ceremony with 25 close friends and family members, focusing on the commitment between Madison and Tyler, rather than social spectacle or material display. I offered to contribute $3,000 toward this celebration as a genuine gift rather than an obligation or manipulation. Madison's response revealed how much she had grown during the recent crisis. She admitted that the elaborate wedding had never represented her actual desires, but rather her attempt to earn approval from parents who measured love through financial expense and social status. The simpler celebration felt more authentic to her personality and relationship with Tyler. More importantly, Madison agreed to testify about our parents' identity theft and financial fraud if legal proceedings became necessary. She recognized that enabling their criminal behavior would only lead to continued victimization of other family members and perpetuation of abuse patterns that had already caused tremendous damage. The final phase of my strategy involved confronting my parents with evidence of their crimes while offering alternatives to criminal prosecution that could lead to accountability and family healing. The meeting took place at their home, where I presented documented proof of forgery identity theft, attempted fraud, and defamation in a calm, professional manner that emphasized facts over emotions. Frank and Linda's initial response was denial and continued manipulation, attempting to minimize their crimes and shift blame onto my ungrateful attitude and selfish priorities. But the evidence was overwhelming and undeniable, making it clear that criminal charges were inevitable unless they chose cooperation and accountability. My ultimatum was simple and non-negotiable: full confession to extended family members about their lies and manipulation, complete restitution for financial damages to Madison and myself, mandatory financial counseling to address their spending dysfunction, and immediate cessation of all attempts to control or manipulate our adult financial decisions. The alternative was criminal prosecution that could result in imprisonment, permanent loss of business licenses, and complete destruction of their professional reputations within our community. The choice was entirely theirs, but the era of family manipulation and financial abuse was ending regardless of their decision. The conversation concluded with my parents agreeing to consider my proposals while I gave them 48 hours to decide whether they wanted accountability and potential redemption or criminal prosecution and family destruction. The scared 18-year-old boy who had once begged for their help was gone forever, replaced by an adult who understood that true love sometimes required setting boundaries that felt harsh, but were actually necessary for everyone's healing and growth. 6 months later, I stood in my newly expanded apartment looking out at the Denver skyline, while reflecting on the remarkable transformation that had occurred in every aspect of my life and family relationships. The view from my upgraded living space served as a daily reminder that standing up for principles and refusing to enable dysfunction had led to outcomes more positive than I could have imagined during those dark weeks when everything seemed to be falling apart. The legal resolution had exceeded my expectations for both justice and redemption. My parents ultimately chose accountability over criminal prosecution, entering plea agreements that required community service, mandatory financial counseling, and full restitution for the damages they had caused to Madison and me. The court-ordered supervision included regular financial reporting and restrictions on their ability to access credit or make major purchases without counselor approval. Frank and Linda served 200 hours of community service, working with financial literacy programs for families struggling with debt and poor money management. The irony of teaching others about responsible financial behavior forced them to confront their own dysfunction while contributing something positive to the community they had embarrassed through their crimes. The mandatory financial counseling sessions revealed deeper psychological issues related to their attitudes toward money, success, and family relationships. Both parents participated in individual and couples therapy that addressed their narcissistic tendencies, their use of financial control as emotional manipulation, and their failure to develop healthy boundaries between personal desires and family responsibilities. Restitution payments totaling $37,000 covered the direct costs of their fraud, identity theft, and defamation campaign, while also compensating Madison and me for credit repair legal fees and professional damages. The monthly payment plan they agreed to would continue for 3 years, serving as an ongoing reminder of the consequences of financial manipulation and abuse. But the most significant change was the gradual rebuilding of honest family relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial obligation and emotional manipulation. The process was slow and sometimes painful, requiring everyone to abandon old patterns and learn new ways of interacting that prioritized authenticity over appearance. Madison's wedding celebration had been everything she actually wanted rather than everything she thought she should want. 25 close friends and family members gathered at a mountain lodge near Boulder, where she and Tyler exchanged vows overlooking natural beauty that required no expensive enhancements or artificial decorations. The ceremony cost exactly $7,800, funded through Madison's personal savings, my contribution of $3,000, and modest gifts from relatives who appreciated the authenticity and intimacy of the celebration. Tyler's family attended and expressed genuine approval of Madison's growth and independence, leading to improved relationships that were based on character rather than financial display. Tyler and Madison's marriage had begun on a foundation of honesty about family problems, financial reality, and personal values that created stronger bonds than any expensive celebration could have provided. Their honeymoon was a camping trip through Colorado's national parks, an experience that cost less than $500 while creating memories and intimacy that no luxury resort could have matched. The couple's approach to financial planning reflected lessons learned from both families' mistakes, emphasizing communication, shared decision-making, and living within their means rather than trying to impress others through material display. Their modest apartment and used car represented choices rather than limitations, allowing them to save money for genuinely important goals, like home ownership and children's education. Madison's personal growth had been remarkable to witness as she developed genuine independence and confidence that no longer depended on parental approval or financial support. She had taken a new job that challenged her professionally while providing income that covered her living expenses without family assistance. Her relationship with our parents had evolved into something healthier but more distant, with clear boundaries about financial discussions and decision-making authority. Madison no longer sought their approval for major life choices, while also maintaining enough contact to support their efforts at personal growth and accountability. Frank and Linda's businesses had stabilized under the guidance of financial counselors who helped them separate personal expenses from business costs while developing sustainable practices that prioritized long-term stability over short-term gratification. The mandatory oversight had been humiliating initially, but ultimately proved beneficial for their financial health and professional reputation. Their home had been refinanced to eliminate the second mortgage they had taken out for wedding expenses, while their personal spending was now governed by budgets that prioritized necessities over luxury purchases. The boat had been sold, expensive vacations had been eliminated, and their lifestyle had been downsized to match their actual income rather than their desired image. The psychological changes in my parents were gradual but genuine, reflecting their growing understanding of how their financial manipulation had damaged both their children and their own integrity. Family therapy sessions had helped them recognize that love couldn't be purchased through expensive gifts or measured through financial contributions. My own professional life had flourished following the crisis, with company leadership recognizing my integrity under pressure and promoting me to a senior development role that included stock options and profit-sharing benefits. My colleagues' respect had deepened through witnessing how I handled family attacks while maintaining professional excellence and ethical standards. The promotion had come with a salary increase to $120,000 annually, providing financial security that felt earned rather than inherited or manipulated. My student loan payments had been accelerated, using the restitution money reducing my debt burden while improving my long-term financial outlook. But more importantly, the experience had taught me valuable lessons about setting boundaries, recognizing manipulation, and distinguishing between family loyalty and enabling dysfunction. The skills I had developed through standing up to financial abuse had applications in every area of my life, from professional relationships to romantic partnerships. Community recognition had come through my involvement in financial literacy programs, where I shared my story with other young adults facing family financial manipulation and abuse. Speaking at workshops about setting healthy boundaries and recognizing financial exploitation had helped dozens of families address similar problems before they escalated to criminal behavior. Extended family relationships had actually improved once the truth about Frank and Linda's lies became public knowledge. Relatives who had been manipulated into criticizing my supposed selfishness expressed admiration for my courage in exposing the fraud, while offering opportunities for family healing rather than simply seeking revenge. The broader community's response had been overwhelmingly supportive, with many business owners and community leaders expressing respect for my handling of the crisis and my parents' willingness to accept accountability rather than continuing to deny their crimes. The family's reputation had been damaged initially, but was slowly rebuilding through demonstrated change and community service. Christmas celebrations had been transformed from expensive displays of gift-giving into modest gatherings focused on genuine connection and shared experiences. The absence of financial pressure and competitive spending had allowed everyone to relax and enjoy each other's company without the underlying tension of meeting material expectations. Looking back on that terrible phone call 6 months earlier, I could see how refusing to pay for Madison's wedding had saved everyone in our family from continued dysfunction and abuse. Enabling their financial manipulation would have only delayed the inevitable crisis while making it worse when it finally erupted. The young man who had struggled through college working multiple jobs had developed strength, resilience, and integrity that served him well when family pressure threatened to destroy his independence and self-respect. The sacrifices and hardships that seemed so unfair at the time had actually prepared him for adult challenges that required moral courage and personal boundaries. Madison and Tyler were planning their future with realistic expectations and honest communication about goals, values, and financial priorities. Their relationship had survived a crisis that would have destroyed partnerships built on less solid foundations, emerging stronger through shared adversity and mutual support. Frank and Linda were slowly learning to find satisfaction through personal accomplishments and healthy relationships, rather than material accumulation and social status. Their journey toward emotional maturity was far from complete, but the foundation for genuine change had been established through accountability and professional guidance. The most profound lesson from this experience was understanding that true family love doesn't come with price tags, financial obligations, or emotional manipulation. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, honest communication, and support for each other's growth and independence, rather than control and exploitation. Standing up for principles had been painful initially, but ultimately led to outcomes that served everyone's long-term interests better than compliance with dysfunction ever could have achieved. Sometimes protecting the people you love means refusing to enable their worst impulses and holding them accountable for behavior that damages themselves and others. The family that emerged from this crisis was smaller in some ways, with less frequent contact and more limited relationships, but it was genuine, honest, and built on foundations that could support healthy interactions for decades to come. The transformation required courage, persistence, and willingness to risk everything for the possibility of something better. As I watched the sun set over Denver's mountains from my apartment window, I felt deep gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this point. The scared 18-year-old boy who had once begged for family help had grown into a man who could protect himself and others from financial abuse while still maintaining hope for healing and redemption. The choice to refuse payment for Madison's wedding had never been about money. It was about refusing to participate in a family system that measured love through financial exploitation and emotional manipulation. By holding firm to principles of respect and honesty, everyone in our family had been given the opportunity to grow into healthier, more authentic versions of themselves. That lesson extended far beyond family relationships into every area of life, where integrity and boundaries matter more than temporary peace or avoiding difficult conversations. The skills developed through standing up to financial abuse had applications in professional settings, romantic relationships, and community interactions, where manipulation and exploitation can disguise themselves as normal expectations. The story that began with a shocking phone call demanding payment for a wedding had evolved into a journey of personal growth, family healing, and community impact that demonstrated how individual courage could create positive change for everyone involved. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for people is refuse to enable their dysfunction, even when that refusal feels cruel and creates temporary pain. 6 months later, our family relationships were built on honesty rather than obligation, respect rather than manipulation, and genuine care rather than financial control. The wedding that was supposed to cost $120,000 had been replaced by something far more valuable: authentic relationships that could support everyone's happiness and growth for years to come. If you've ever faced family financial manipulation or pressure to enable someone else's poor decisions, I want to hear about your experience and how you handled it. What boundaries have you had to set with family members who saw your success as their opportunity? How did you balance love and accountability when those seemed to conflict? Please share your stories in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video if it helped you think about family dynamics in a new way. Subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself while maintaining relationships that matter, and share this with anyone who might be facing similar challenges with family financial pressure. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it encourages you to protect your own integrity while still believing in the possibility of healing and positive change for the people you love.